Hey, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. Credit to Justin Campbell at jcamp1521 for the intro as always. Today, my guest is Ian Crossland. For those who are just now catching this, who aren't familiar with the format, if you're watching today on the 30th, Memorial Day, this is a live stream. It'll go down and it'll come up roughly a week or so later. I'll put it back up public. So if you want to access in the meantime, you got to have the Patreon, patreon.com. Just No Way Jose 2020. Lowest level's $2, highest level's $20. The $20 levels are sponsors. I'll read them off every level or every week. I got C.D. McRae of the Whiskey and Tea podcast, Jeremy of and he has Etsy at etsy.com/shops/raising liberty. You can follow him at Twitter at Jeremy Rhymes. Also, Mikkel Thorup of the Expat Money Show. So if you're a person of means and you're trying to move towards liberty, you want to go somewhere, specifically out of the country, he's your guy. Go hit him up. He has a podcast. He also has a business that helps facilitate people with this. I just want to let you guys know I do have some more Anarchist Handbook episodes in the work. We'll get to that. I also, go check out TopLobsta.com. Use Jose at checkout for 10% off. And with that, let's go into it. We're keeping this short and sweet so we can respect Ian's time. Oh God. Hey, what's up, man?
What's up, dude?
Hey, how you doing? It's good to see you too. Appreciate having you here. If you want to take a minute, this is the first time on the show, if you can take a minute to introduce yourself to the audience for those who aren't familiar with you, who you are, what you're about, basically whatever you want to do, whatever kind of info you want to give.
Well, my name is Ian Crossland. I'm a co-founder of Minds.com, social network, free software, copyleft social network. And I'm also the co-host on Timcast IRL with Tim Pool, which is like a Monday through Friday show on YouTube if you haven't seen it. It's really cool. It's an interview show. We get some of the greatest guests. The best.
The best.
Yeah.
The best. Yeah, you've had a few of my friends on there. You've had Clinton Russell. He's also a co-host on another show that I'm on with, and a few other of my friends. So I do appreciate you. Definitely you guys give some shine to people of our community, of the liberty community, if you will. So I do appreciate it. David, I see you in the chat. This is not Ian's department. You're barking up the wrong tree. You need to go hit up Lydia. That's the person. He's asking when Tower Power Hour is going to be on the show, because she said that we would be able to come on like forever ago. But I think she probably watched the show and thought otherwise, because we're a little bit of shitlords, if you will. So yeah. But I mean, the wrong tree you're barking up, David. But yeah. I do want to go over real quick how we kind of met for the audience, or not necessarily met, but kind of got introduced. Is actually, ironically, the guy who just dropped that chat, David. He'd been pestering you for a while, because I have a series I'm doing for each chapter of Michael Malice's The Anarchist Handbook book. I've been doing an episode for each chapter. So far, I've had people like Dave Smith. He covered the Rothbard chapter. I had I had Goldman. I did Thaddeus Russell covered that. But it goes on. I've gotten a lot of good guests for that, and I feel like I've gotten like perfect people for each one. So it's been good so far. But he kept dropping, being like, thinking you should. I know you're not an anarchist, and we can kind of get into that. Or at least I don't think you are, from the little bit of research I've done. But I did get a vibe, and he kept dropping your name. I was like, I feel like he could do Proudhon, because I don't know why I get a Proudhon vibe from you. I get very much like left libertarian / classical liberal vibes from you. And some of the things you've said, I feel like identify with Proudhon. So I do want to touch on a little bit, because I did send you the essay and I had you read it, and you had some critiques. And instead of going back and forth on messages to see if you are the right person, I figured, we'll just do a standard interview, and I'll kind of gauge you a little bit, because the purpose of those ones is not to like critique them. It's more to like kind of give I guess like a steelman version of them to people. That way they can kind of, it's to kind of accompany the book, so they can be like, oh, this is cool. And like, oh, what was the moral of this? Like, I don't want to bring on somebody who's just going to tear apart it. You know what I mean? Because that would be kind of counter to the point of the series. But I did send you the Proudhon one, and I kind of want to get your takeaways. You had some critiques, and I think from the critiques, I do remember you saying in the DMs, I kind of agree with them, because I'm not a Proudhonian, or whatever you would call it. I'm not of his ilk either, but there were some cool takeaways I got from that, and we'll get into that. I guess we can start with, what is your persuasion? Am I correct? I'm sure you're probably not want to give yourself a label, and I get that. But where are you coming from in your school of thought?
Politically, you mean?
Yes, politically, yeah.
I guess historically, I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio, which is kind of like a liberal pocket in a conservative state. So I grew up with an outside perspective of the conservative movement, kind of. So my parents were usually critiquing it with a little bit more of a liberal mindset. And like, I'm talking like, classically liberal stuff. Like my mom was a second wave feminist, big on like equality of opportunity for everybody. And then this weird, the evolution of feminism, how it's like, seems to have changed so much. That's not, when I talk about feminism, I'm still thinking about like, equality for people.
Yeah. So many ways.
When I think of politics, man, I think of technology firstly, like who's controlling the narrative. I go usually just lift off above the red and blue, left and right, mudslinging crap, and think about who's controls the networks that are allowing people and deciding what message is getting spread, which is a form of politics. BlackRock buying land up, Washington Post being owned by Amazon or Jeff Bezos, that's political. It's just not Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, no, this is stuff people call conspiracy. But I'm sorry,
technocratic. It's technocratic, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's a form that's political persuasion. And I in my early days, I was all on board for technocracy. I was like, yo, we're all going to plug our brains in and be in the matrix and have. But now I'm starting to see proprietary software, control of networks, and media messaging is a much more. So I don't even know. When it comes to technology, I'm a bit of an anarchist. I don't think that people should have control of these huge networks. I don't think any one person should be. I like the idea that it's a public utility.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you might not be too hip to the IP idea, or are you a fan of IP? Because I get where you're getting at. It should be more open software type stuff.
Yeah, I like IP for people that are building stuff. But when things become so huge that they're used by hundreds of millions of people a day, and that they're treated like common networking, common carrier networks like Facebook, the amount of people that use that, the amount of messaging that goes through that can get manipulated. I think that we have to come together as a species, or at least as Americans, and legislate like antitrust in some form. And I don't think breaking the companies up is the way to do it. So I think making their software license copy left, which is AGPL3, things that make it permanently free software code. I like calling it, for a while I've been calling it free software. I'm like, free the code, but people are misinterpreting that and thinking that it means that it's free and that you can't sell it. Like anyone can have it for free. What it means is that the licensing codes, instead of being proprietary and being like, the secret code, that the codes become like available for the public to use. It's like a form of open source code, but it's more, if you take it and make changes to it, those changes remain free with an AGPL3 license.
Oh yeah, for sure. I get what you mean. It doesn't mean people can't charge for it. It's just the original code. By the way, I'm a tech idiot, so I'm good on theory when it comes to like crypto stuff like that. But when it comes to nitty gritty, it took me forever to start a podcast just because of the fact I'm awful when it comes to tech, and I've been a mechanic my whole life. So like when it comes to stuff like this, it's like but I get the theory of it.
As I'm talking, I'm like, maybe I'm not an anarchist when it comes to technology, because I'm considering using government legislation to decide that these companies have to free their software licensing because they become so big. And that's not, anarchists would be like, whatever happens. I'm not using the rule of law to force companies, but I think that monopolies, they need to be broken up. That's the history of private companies, is if they get too big, they become kingdoms.
Well, not to go deep into the anarchist argument to try to convince you, but I would say on the flip side of that, many anarchists, myself included, would argue that in a free site, and this kind of brings the IP thing, I know you say more IP for certain things and not for others, but in general, there would be no enforcement thing. I mean, there would be like social enforcement. So say in case of like a comedy bit, this already happens. They don't really have legislation for it. If someone steals a bit, it's kind of like, you look at like George Lopez or whoever it was who stole a bunch of stuff and Rogan called him out. Like he can't work in that realm anymore because people just, I'm sure he does a little bit here and there, but not like he used to, because it's just a social shaming. But now when it comes to like stuff like code or stuff like that, there's no one to enforce the, not being, I guess maybe you were saying maybe they'd force them to release it. But in a free society, they wouldn't have patents or stuff of the like that would keep them, that would have legal protection for it. So like, yeah, maybe they could try to protect it, but at some point, let's be real. If you get a big enough company, the code is going to get leaked to someone in some way, shape, or form somehow. And at that point, there's no legal enforcement that would slap the wrist of the individual who leaked it, if you will. So not to go too deep into that, because there are people though who do believe in like IP, even an anarchist thing, because they would consider it property, and a lot of anarchists are property respecters, and you can get in the realm like Proudhon is kind of weird in his concept of property, whereas I'm more of like an ANCAP, where I do respect private property. I just don't consider IP private property. So
I also think like how Blackstone's buying housing, single
Mhm.
family homes. I guess if I was like laissez-faire with law and government, I would just stand by and watch it happen. But it seems like the corporations aren't people. They might legally be considered people right now, but that's completely insane to me. These companies, what right do they have to own people's houses?
Oh, it's all
I
good.
think I should close that window.
It's all good. I have on my end. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'll go on for the audience.
No.
I have a lot of people know I breed cats. If you hear any crying in the background, it's because I have a cat that's all ready to be bred and is being very
Great.
vocal. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, weird job, but it helps pay the bills.
Yeah, I was thinking like if you were to say like a company has gotten so big, like say YouTube, Google is so big that the code belongs to the people now because that's the people's product. That how would you enforce that? You give them cease and desists. You're like, hey, do it. If they don't do it, you have to send the police, and then you arrest the business managers that are refusing to release the code. And that at that point, it's no longer anarchy. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know what you call it, government.
Yeah, and, you brought up the Blackstone example. This is funny enough. I mean, not to get too deep into labels, but I would be considered what's like an agorist, which is like a subset of an ANCAP, in my opinion. And this is funny. A lot of ANCAPs have come around to my form of thinking because things like Blackstone, a lot of it's been pretty common for the decades that a lot of ANCAP types or even conservatives have very much been like Ayn Randian when it comes to corporations and stuff, and kind of almost revere them. But I think the past couple years, especially with COVID and everything, has really opened the eyes of a lot of people of like, hey, corporations are these bastard children of the government and the free market. So, like, I'm not saying that we should weaponize the government to get rid of them, but if there was no government, it would prevent a lot of the protections they have. They would be more subject to like free market type stuff. I also think as people like us, we should to some extent eschew them, kind of be like, fuck these guys. Like if you're able to, I do think you should, like, say for example, if you have there's a Walmart and then you have a little La Tienda of some like little thing, and you know the products at the little La Tienda, the little Mexican shop, you should probably go to the Mexican shop. Why frequent Walmart if you don't have to in that given situation? Because I mean, Walmart is a large corporation, gets a lot of kickbacks from the government, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that is a common thing with ANCAPs. There's actually but I do think a lot of them have changed in that they did used to be very much simp for corporations and stuff, where I do think that is changing these days, which is a good thing. Because I think that's one thing we commonly would shit on the left for that, but I think in the past couple of years we realized, well, maybe the left had a fucking point.
I've actually lately been thinking that calling corporations like that, we need different words for different types of corporation. Your corporation, and then if you get so big, like once it gets 50 employees or more, that beast has become another type of organization. Calling it still simply a corporation doesn't make a lot of sense at that point. It's something way different. It's like pseudo government almost. I don't know what. Yes, exactly, so we need new laws for these gigantic, huge, influential wealth monsters.
The way I like to characterize, a lot of people of my persuasion tend to look at like the free market and the government as like a binary, whereas I think it's more conducive to look at it as a spectrum, because like say like the little Mexican store that's just got a couple employees, it's a little tiny spot, like that's definitely way closer to the free market side of the thing. But now something like Walmart, I don't think they're technically the government, but they're not 100% free market either. They have so many protections from the government, special kickbacks, corporate welfare, things of the like, that at some point it's like, yeah, maybe technically they're not the state, but let's be real, they're not the free market either. So I do think, like you said, there is definitely something to the fact of not looking at this in simplistic this or that type way. So
yeah, the word state is interesting. Like, hey, what's your state of mind? What state are you in right now? That is vague. I'm in Ohio, but I'm also in a very happy state. So like, what's the state? It's like, what's the status quo? This what's running? What's the accepted norm of your reality? If it's Walmart, then Walmart is the state of your being at that moment. And so just because we call Ohio a state and California a state doesn't mean that's the only kind of state you can exist within. We got to be careful what our status is.
Yeah. Now let's go ahead and get into Proudhon. I want to get your thoughts on it, because this is a spot to where because I actually very well may end up asking you to come on for this episode, depending on what your thoughts are on it. Because, I mean, obviously, I don't expect anyone to have 100% agree with each individual one. But, I mean, depending on what your critiques, takeaways, what you thought it was about in general, I may or may not. Because I do, like, even just now, from the things you're saying, it's very... a lot of stuff you're saying is very conducive to a lot of stuff Proudhon would say. This specific essay doesn't really go into that as much because it wasn't really the point of the essay, although that is where Proudhon comes from. For those who aren't aware, and I'm not sure if you are, he is what it was called a mutualist, which is like this kind of like in between of like ANCAPs and like anarcho-socialists, where he didn't necessarily think that people couldn't have property, but he he kind of issued it, kind of didn't like it. If anything, it was is like he wouldn't want to use force to have people to stop people from claiming property. He would more just be like, well, we don't like that, kind of more like a social force type deal. And he was more against things like usury, like stuff like that. So I do want to get your thoughts. What were your critiques of it? I know you mentioned something about equality, which I do actually agree with, or equity is more specifically, that he kind of was implying in some aspects of the essay. So what were your critiques of the Proudhon essay I sent you from the Anarchist Handbook?
I read 4 pages. I didn't get the numbers of the pages, and they may have been in and out of order. I'm not 100% sure. And I didn't really, to be honest, I didn't understand the context because it was just what I've noticed about reading manuscripts and political essays and things is that they use words like revolutionary, but for them, it has a specific meaning. At that time, when he was alive, there were a group of people that were revolutionaries. He has a few words that he used that I think, like Hitler would talk about the party, and the party was a capital P. And if you don't know what genre he's talking about, you don't know what that word means. But to him, he uses it over and over again with such force. And so unless you already know ahead of time, it becomes very confusing. And that's kind of what I got out of this. It sounded like let me see if I can pull up my initial thoughts, that he thought that, I don't know, man, this is not even remotely my specialty.
No, you're good. You're good.
Was there something in specific about it, like a text or something that you were wondering about?
Oh, I just wonder overall. I just want to kind of get your disagreements, critiques, generally speaking. It doesn't have to be anything specific, because I do remember you had sent me you had said that he at one point said that humans should be equal, and me and you both disagree that humans are equal. I mean, I guess it depends on in what sense you mean equal. But generally speaking, yes, I don't think everyone's equal. I don't think me and you are equal. I think we have different skills, different abilities, different intelligence levels, different, etc. Like obviously you're more of a tech guy. I'm not. I'd probably be better at fixing things. I've been an airplane mechanic for forever. So like I probably could fix an airplane better than you could, stuff like that. And then, even if you do sum up everything, there are some people who are to some extent probably borderline worthless, that don't really have much to contribute to society at all, there are other people on the other side of it who have far more, to like an Elon Musk or something like that. So yeah, I guess I just kind of want to get your thoughts to see if there's anything specifically that you overall disagreed with it. I do get that the context is kind of weird, because there's like, you're pretty sure he's French, so we're reading something that's French from like centuries ago. Yeah. I mean, I do think when he was speaking revolution, he was more meaning like in a political, and I do think in some ways he meant it in like almost like a mental and spiritual way in some aspects. Because I know a lot of people use revolution in a lot of different ways. Because most people hear revolution, they think like 1776. Whereas, I mean, you can have a revolution of the mind, you can have a revolution of the spirit. So I didn't know if there's anything specifically that you had aside from that. If not, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, you made a good point about being equal. I seem to remember, I'm looking through, I have PDFs, so I'm not able to search with Control F, but he was talking about people being equal, and I thought, we're not. Legally, we set up a system that says all men are created equal under God, just for the sake of it, but we're all so vastly different. And equality doesn't mean that we're the same, but it seemed like Proudhon was implying that because we were equal, we are the same. And so we require and need the same things and deserve the same, and should also get the same outcomes. That's the gist I was feeling. I don't agree with that at all. Some people are just high IQ, fast, big, strong, intelligent, kind. Other people are born half mentally deranged and like just missing a chromosome or something. And the sad truth is, I don't think top-down governance works for that reason. You got to kind of but then, you do need protections against individual intelligent psychopaths that try and take over and seize power.
Which would be for Proudhon. I think that would be like why he more prefers like a social thing. It's kind of the same thing where he doesn't like property, like to bring that up again, but he would more prefer to, if we get enough people to kind of to look down upon it, that it would naturally over time kind of waste away, which obviously I don't agree with that specifically, but I get where he's coming from.
Oh, so he's assuming that if you kind of let people know you disagree with their behavior, eventually they'll stop doing it.
To some extent. I mean, specifically, to be fair, I'm not a huge Proudhon guy. This is the only thing I've ever read of Proudhon. I did enjoy it. I did think it had some cool takeaways. I did like how he kind of characterized some things, specifically when it comes to revolutions and stuff like that. But yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, what was your biggest takeaway from this essay, or takeaways, if there were multiple? If there's anything you got out of it, or if it really was just kind of like Greek to you, because I'll be honest, I didn't get a ton out of it, but I did get some cool stuff out of it personally.
Yeah, really, it was the way he used language. I have some of it written down here, like radicals and absolutists. He's talking about like political ideologies of the time, because a radical then is not what a radical is now. When you say that there's a bunch of radicals out there, it's going to have a different definition, same word, different meaning. And so I realized as I was reading this, how texts can be taken out of context. Like people might read this today and think it means something other than what he intended for it to mean when he wrote it.
Yeah,
I got more of that like overarching idea than anything specific about what he was saying, because I didn't have the context.
Yeah, I do remember. God, what was I going to say? I was looking for different versions of it to give to you. I ended up having to just screenshot it and send it to you, because it is, like I said, French. So like even just as simple as trying to find a version of it, there were different translations and stuff. So it does get wonky when you're dealing with language, and especially something that's dated, stuff like that. I guess the last question about Proudhon, I want to know what did you think the moral of the essay in general was? I just kind of want to see what you thought it was about overall, or yeah.
It sounded like he was advocating for, I mean, I read it like a month ago, and I read it I think it's out of context, so I really didn't understand it. But what I got was that he was advocating for like communism or socialism. I couldn't tell. It sounded like he was saying people like are all the same, so we need to treat them the same.
Yeah, he definitely, like I said, it is kind of a weird, he has the mutualism thing. So it is kind of like a socialism, communism type thing. Although the difference being that he wouldn't, his big thing is he wouldn't want to apply force like many anarcho-communists would say with someone who claims property. So, because that's a big issue with a lot of anarcho-communists and stuff, is it's like, cool, like if you're doing your own thing and you're off there and leaving us alone. But the problem is a lot of them are like, oh no, property's violence, and you're like, whoa, now we have some issues. Because I like my property, and we're gonna have problems if you're saying I can't have it. But yeah, let's change gears. I want to get your thoughts on the latest school shooting, and then maybe we might go a little bit conspiratorial if you're comfortable with that. Because I'm very much in a conspiratorial mindset, because my other show, which is like more of a comedy show, we're getting ready to do a whole conspiracy month, and then this stuff dropped, and I was like, obviously this is like red meat for any conspiracy people. So we'll probably go full Alex Jones here soon in this week whenever we cover it. But I just want to get your thoughts in general. I guess specifically on guns and of the like, because normally I ignore these things because, I feel like the media trumps them up. But I'm not going to lie, this one fucked me because I'm a dad, and especially the angle of the cops preventing parents from doing anything while they didn't really do anything, like really fucked me up. And I'm not one to usually get sucked into news stories, but that one really tugged on my heartstrings a lot and made me very angry. I'm not gonna lie. So I guess I want to get your thoughts on it in general.
I'm a similar mindset. I don't have any kids right now, but man, when I saw that, I got into the head of one of the parents. I just felt like their emotions, like, what if a cop stopped me from going in to get my kid, and because of that the kid got killed? And like, what, you're the police, you're the protector, and you, because of your ignorance or stupidity or just pure bureaucracy, now children have died because of it, because of some paperwork. Like, I don't know if they were told. Apparently they had a local guy was in charge and made the wrong call. This is the story now. And
Some
said,
boss
stand
hog
up.
looking motherfucker. Yeah.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah.
And then it was like 19 cops or something sitting outside the school. I don't know if they were in the hallway outside where the gunman was inside with the kids, killing them slowly. And the cops just didn't kick the door in because they didn't know if they were, I don't know what they knew. Did they think there were 3 shooters, all with their ARs trained on the door, ready and just baiting the cops in? So as the cops came in, they were just going to get taken down one by one. So they didn't want to go in, but it was like they were treating it like a hostage situation.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was an active shooting situation. It's a difference. You're supposed to go in those cases.
Yeah, it was pretty tragic. Yeah, no, yeah, it was my understanding that he barricaded himself in one of the rooms, and I guess they were like, "Oh, well, I guess we're good. He's contained." But it's like, yeah, but he's contained in a room full of children. So I mean, and he's literally shooting them. So I mean, every little bit of information that I've gone, I typically try my best to be like, well, you know, I'm not a big fan of cops because I'm an anarchist type, but I do try to be like, hey, I'm not just going to let my biases control me. But the more I look into the more I'm like, it just kind of confirms my bias further and further, the more I look into it. Because every little bit of information I get is like, what the fuck happened? Like, it wasn't until the Border Patrol showed up that it seemed to be something of substance actually, you know, was accomplished. But I mean, I guess I wasn't there, but still, yeah, the parents aspect of it really messed me up big time. But yeah, it's for those who aren't aware, the one photo that was getting shared around of the guy who was getting tackled by the cops, that guy's kid literally died. That guy, the one that they handcuffed and held down, his kid literally died. And on the inverse, there was a woman who literally ran past the cops, hopped the fence, and was able to get their kids out. So it's like 2 different stories, and it's just tragic, especially when you compare and contrast the two. You know, I mean, it's just awful altogether. I guess we can kind of move a little bit to the gun side of things. What are your thoughts on that aspect? Because obviously everyone wants to make this about guns. I guess we touched on police a little bit, obviously the bureaucracy of it. I mean, it's kind of hard to judge them too harshly, although I'm definitely very much want to, because like, who knows, maybe we'll find out information later and they were to some extent making the right move. I have a hard time, or not right move based on the information they had, but it's hard to believe that at this given time. But I mean, I don't know, I guess I'll be a little bit fair, but I guess we can kind of shift to the gun side. Like, what are your thoughts on the gun aspect of it?
I thought I've had a few thoughts about it actually, that the police should have the opportunity to train and carry concealed carry. If a teacher is trained and wants to, that they should be allowed to have a concealed carry in the classroom to defend those kids and themselves. Secondly, I think that kids should be having some sort of gun safety training when they're young, when they're like in 3rd or 4th grade. They know it's not a demon, it's a tool that can be extremely destructive, like fire, but you want to educate these kids. So if a shooter kicks the door open, puts a bullet in the teacher's head, and then the kids are screaming and running for their lives, one of the kids knows how to pick that gun up and use it to save his life. Otherwise, the kid's going to get killed. Yeah. I started thinking, like, maybe when people are 25, we should have the right to go get a government issued firearm if we can take the test and apply. I don't know. I had this conversation with my dad a couple nights ago out at dinner. We were all talking about gun rights, and like, you know, the Second Amendment says enemies both foreign and domestic. Okay. So if there really was people like, you don't need an AR-15 to defend yourself against attacking force. It's an assault weapon. And I'm like, okay, if you have an attacking, invading force on soil, they're going to be in the building over there. Hold up. You need to assault the building. It's not about sitting still and waiting. When you're the defender, you don't sit still. You're still assaulting the attacker's position. So yes, you need assault weapons. You need bayonets, and you need flashbangs and grenades and semi-auto and who knows what else, because you're going to need to take out 4 to 5 positions. It's also people thinking that AR means automatic rifle or assault rifle, when it means Armalite rifle. Yeah. It doesn't. It's a semi-automatic weapon. Yeah. Not an automatic weapon.
Yeah, you'll beat your head against the wall if you always try to. There's always so many people and blue checks, like important people that will just say the most ridiculous things about like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a gun nut at all, but I was raised in the country. I'm not someone who can name you off all different types of guns. I know how to use guns. I'm decent. I have multiple guns, but I actually don't even see myself at all even close to being like a good gun nut or aficionado. I'm just generally kind of familiar with them. But like, it's ridiculous some of the shit people will say. They'll say, you always see all the time. People be like, "Oh, these guns, will blow huge holes in people and shit like that." Like, ARs typically have some of the smallest ammo. Like, what do you like? Especially if you're like advocating for hunting rifles, it's like 30-06s are the things that will blow holes in things. So like,
what's interesting is like we had this conversation about what's safe to let the U.S. population, what weapons are like too powerful to let civilianry have to defend itself. Nuclear bombs, probably, because if everybody had a nuclear bomb in their hand and one of the guys dropped it, it would set off and blow up like 8 city blocks. That seems too dangerous. It seems too dangerous. AR-15, semi-automatic 30-round rifles. It's not a mass destruction weapon. I mean, you could cause a lot of damage with it, but it's not considered. I don't think it's considered mass destruction with like large explosion radius or huge chemical vapor, acidification or something. So what's too dangerous? Obviously, I think a nuclear bomb would be too dangerous for someone to go pick up at the local gun store. High-powered artillery that can fire intercontinental ballistic missiles, probably too dangerous for your average civilian to have in their backyard. But like what I don't know, man. It's a tough conversation because if there really was an insurgency, all bets are off. People need whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah, and a lot of things, I mean, aside from nukes, obviously, even a lot of the anarchists are like, all right, nukes is where I draw the line. And a lot of people have different arguments for why or why not, even in anarchist society, why it's okay or not. Because a lot of people make the case that, like, this is in no way something you would use for self-defense or whatever, like, or even, like, in a legitimate way to ever attack anyone. There's no, like, real legitimate use. Like, I'm even of the opinion that even when we nuked Japan, I think we were completely in the wrong and that was not okay. But I mean, I'm not going to go down that tangent. But I can't think of a single scenario because there's no way to pinpoint unless somehow every offensive person there is somehow magically in that same area. But there's no way you're not going to kill civilians. Like, that's just not, like, you're going to take out innocent people with a nuke. But like, aside from that, it's like, say like a tank or something like that. It's like people always like, what do you think people should have a tank? It's like, if you can afford a tank, like, I mean, what kind of person do you think there are crazies out there just spending their whole life saving up for a tank just so they can go on like a assault mission? Like, it's probably not going to be a cheap, easy thing to get. And even then it'll probably take some training to use. So if you've put in that much time and effort into doing it, at that point, it's probably like you're most likely someone who could be trusted with it. And if not, if other people allowed their tanks, what, some other person with a tank will take it out. But yeah, that's kind of where I am on that. I forgot I had a point, but yeah, no, with nukes, it is ridiculous. It definitely is. It's hard to justify people having nukes. But aside from that, I'm definitely very much a Second Amendment or just Second Amendment might be the wrong way of putting it, but a protecting yourself maximalist, or because I mean, you never know. I mean, if I want to have a bazooka, I should be able to have a bazooka. But now, if I fucking shoot somebody with it that didn't deserve it, then that's a different issue. So
yeah, I'm thinking about drones. People are restricted on the type of drones and where they can fly drones. That's almost like a Second Amendment issue because drones can be weaponized very easily. And then I'm thinking about radio waves, like different. When you're using the ham radio, you can only do certain frequencies, or it becomes a government. It's illegal according to the government. That's almost like a second. It's not the Second Amendment. It's more of a First Amendment issue. Like, what do you say? I don't have the right to communicate. I'm an American. I have access to the airwaves. I can do whatever I'm not whatever I want, but within my constitutional God-given right is I'm allowed to use my speech, my communication. But the government tries to limit it for whatever, for better or worse. I don't know. You can't have everyone with all power because I think someone would blow it all up on accident or on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're talking nuke, sure. I mean, even then, I know a lot of anarchists will make the argument that in a nuke situation, it still would be like you'd have to pay so much. And these aren't just things you'd be able to just go to it's not like you just go to the gun store, spend $100 and get a nuke. Like, there'd definitely be a whole lot of, there'd be a whole lot of to-dos to that. I don't know. The nukes is where I'm like, I don't know. That's for me, like, protect, like, guns, whatever. Pretty much everything up until nukes, and then it's like, all right, maybe there's a discussion to be had, and at that point, I don't even really care to have a discussion. Now we're just kind of having intellectual masturbation at that point. So,
yeah, like if I had a satellite that could fire a high-powered laser and like level a house, and I'm like, hey, I'm using it for defense in case someone tries to attack my house. But if I wanted to, I could send it over, North Dakota and blow up some city. Then you're like, is it really, just because it can potentially be used as a destructive offensive weapon doesn't mean it's not defensive. But
yeah, I mean, I guess for you, that kind of brings me back to my nuke point, because it's hard to make any sort of argument whatsoever that a nuke is in any way defensive. I mean, unless you're talking nation to nation, but then, like I said, you're taking out innocent people, so I don't think that is legitimate at that point. All right, Offer Nave has a super chat. By the way, I'm taking super chats if anyone wants to do it, but he wanted. I don't know if you're aware. He wanted me to let you know what happened in Reno. I don't know if you're following all that stuff.
Negative.
Oh, well, you're a fan of Dave Smith. I know you guys. Yeah, I love Dave Smith too. He's the one who made me an anarchist. He's a great guy. I've had him on my show multiple times. Yeah, him, I guess not specifically him, but the LPMC in general just took over. They swept the LP. So now the LP is being controlled by the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus, which is basically Dave's thing, essentially. I mean, technically doesn't have any leadership position, but they're the one they've been touting as like as the next presidential candidate. He's kind of the figurehead, if you will. So he wanted to let you know that that's what happened. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, I'm not a political involvement guy, but I mean, at the same time, I will clap whenever they do something cool. And I do think to some extent it is kind of cool. It's nice seeing all the useless, people that that scream about racism and Nazis and call them all this crazy stuff. I'm sure you probably don't follow all that drama, that are freaking out and leaving the party. So while I don't necessarily go the political involvement route, it's nice to see that. I definitely, it's kind of like the Trump thing. Like, it's nice. I wasn't a Trump fan, but I did like all the people he made mad. It was fun to watch. So yeah.
Dave's a friend of mine, and so I'm glad when people I know and like get into positions of power that they want to be in, because I feel like I can help them for the greater good. And I'm similar with Donald Trump. We had Kash Patel on IRL last week, who was the chief of staff of the Secretary of Defense under Donald Trump. And Donald actually called Kash before the show and put him on speaker, and we were listening to him talk about Truth Social. And I'm not very political. I don't really care to get embroiled in the mudslinging of who's right and who's wrong and who's better. But like, if we can use the political force to build like a new technological industry, I'm all about it. Whether it's Dave, Don, Joe, I don't care. I want to work together to get it done. I want to use. I'm a little on the cuff about using taxpayer dollars. I used to think that we could start like a graphene industry where we start using lasers to develop this flash graphene, supercapacitors, superconductors, new forms of wiring, housing, building, clothing. But then I'm like, maybe using the government isn't the way. Maybe it's to start a corporation and do it in the private sector. Like you were saying earlier, these corporations become quasi-fascist, government, private. Maybe that's the way to do it. It is fascist to take a corporation and get government handouts, but I think if you just government to get your technology built, that it just becomes so bureaucratic, and that the private sector has more agility.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, that is the scary thing about fascism, is because I'm sure it's the merger of corporate and or of the private and public sector. It's it weirdly is this like they almost create this hierarchy of of corporations that serve under the state over time, and that's basically what fascism is, and it's so scary because it is way more effective than most forms of authoritarian government. So, like we saw in the past few years, whenever, say something like a lockdown or something comes along, or vaccine mandates or whatever, that's when they start being like, oh, well, this company, this company, that. And it's like, yeah, a lot of them, they did to some extent have the state make some laws, but in a lot of cases it was just, they fell in line immediately because they kind of know where their power comes from. Their power comes from the state. Whereas, you had little like the true free market, whether it be people in the black market or the gray markets, or people just have smaller type places, they were way more flexible. It was people that had jobs like that were able to get away with shit like that. But yeah, no, it's scary when you do see that stuff like that, how that works. But yeah, I get what you mean. It's way more effective to interact with like if you have some, like your graphene thing. We'll get into graphene. I want to touch on that probably towards the end, but because that's your big thing. But yeah, if you had some sort of industry, it would be, if you had the government handling it, like the government, basically handling anything by themselves, they just fuck it up almost royally, because they are not an effective organization. There's no incentives whatsoever for them to do things effectively, whether it's quick or efficiently, what have you, or with high quality. They're awful. Like I was active duty military for 11 years, and I can tell you for the fact, and that's probably one of the few places that's a little bit better than most aspects of the government. And even then, like, I know, like, I was an airplane mechanic, and I would see the receipts on the shit we'd pay for. We'd pay like almost $100 for a fucking bolt. And you'd be like, why? And you're like, well, because we only had one provider, because when they sold us a plane, that was what they said, and we didn't give a shit. So we're like, yep, we can only buy the part from them. So we just created a shitload of monopoly. So like, this is just how the government works in general. So yes, it definitely makes sense if you do it with a corporation. It would work far better.
Yeah, I was thinking along those lines, like Twitter when they banned Donald Trump. If that had been a government social network and they did that, the U.S. people would have outraged about free speech. It would have been a big deal and probably been overturned because of the Constitution. But because it was a private company, if the government asks them to do it, there's like this mask of it being a private enterprise. And it's really not. I mean, maybe you could argue, like, who did it? Who made the final call? Who set it in motion? It's all very obfuscated behind enemy lines or behind, the cloud of war, the fog.
All right, just for fun, like I said on my other show, I've been going more conspiratorial, and this is one of the ones that came up when I was going on a deep dive looking into cool different conspiracy theories. And I don't know why this is even classified a conspiracy theory. I don't feel like it really qualifies it, but I feel like this is right up your alley. And I want to know, first off, have you ever heard of the idea of that the universe is just simply God experiencing ego death? Have you ever heard that?
No.
No. All right, cool. I'm an atheist or agnostic atheist, whatever. I don't know there isn't a God, but I don't believe in one because I just haven't seen anything to convince me of it. That's kind of where I am, because a lot of people try to say atheist. I'm saying for a fact I know there's no God. I don't know that. But anyways, this kind of I'll set it up. This kind of starts from the idea of if you've ever heard the God of the gaps argument. It's the argument that like people will make, like, well, we can't understand this concept, so therefore it must be God. And what happens, that shrinks constantly. Now, what the smart theists, smart religious people, don't make that argument. They do the inverse usually and be like, well, God is everything. God is, in everything, because they know that if you make that argument, because 1,000 years ago you had said, lightning, therefore God. And now we are able to explain that. And if you use that line of argument, it goes away. So the flip side being God is everything if you don't use that argument. Now, this goes into, and I know you're a big hallucinogenic guy, and this feels like this would be something up your alley. The idea being, if that's the case, then God is technically everything to some extent. And if that's the case, then, I mean, especially in the Bible, the way they explain God is typically that he wanted someone to share in the creation with him. And so essentially, if you follow this line of logic, he broke himself up, and essentially the universe collectively essentially is him. But evil came into the world because you took a perfect good and you broke it up. Collectively as a group, we are perfect good, but when you break it up, we aren't. So the idea being that everything in its totality is God, together, but the universe. So essentially that meaning that God is the universe experiencing ego death because it's been broken up in multiple ways. I don't know why. I just thought this would be an interesting thing to wrap your head around, because I think about it and it's just cool to go down these weird little rabbit holes and think about. I just thought, especially you being a big psychonaut, that might be something that kind of turns your gears in your head a little bit. It's not really a conspiracy thing. I don't know why it was in that thing I went to, but I just, for some reason, that really struck with me. I was like, I'm going to bring that up to Ian because I feel like he may really dig that. I'm not even saying that is necessarily a confirmation of God, but if there is a God, there's a good line of logic to be like, well, that's interesting. I guess that kind of explains a lot.
Like, at one perspective, what are we, protons? I think, like, okay, if we're the protons, we're interacting with negativity. We're interacting with electrons. Maybe electrons are evil. We are good. We're interacting with evil to become reality. I don't know. But good and evil, I find so dichotomatic. Like, it's a very simplistic way of looking at things. Like, that's black, that's white. When in reality, we know there's no such thing as black and white. Maybe there's like black body thing that emits no light that we can measure. Just because we can't measure it doesn't mean it's not there. So, like, to say that there's absolutes of black and white is as insane as saying there is or is not a God, or to say, good and evil. Like, things are so much more nuanced. Construction and destruction, creation and destruction are like inevitable aspects of formation, but that doesn't mean that they're good and evil necessarily. Yeah. When it comes to God, I think it's like, I thought like once I saw the cosmic microwave background radiation, which through radio telescopes, you see this web of energy left over from the Big Bang that they think is what was the Big Bang. I think that that's like interfering or interacting with matter. You see it arcing through planetoids, like going through suns and planets, and like you see it like a web where the nodes are like the star systems or like planets, and then even your own body is like this energy's flowing through it. And I think it's that moment when it flows through that is God, that we perceive as like this active force, like writing code on our subatomic particles. The thing is, then it gets deeper. That's just one perspective, protons and electrons. You go down to the spinners, like the subatomic stuff, like quarks and leptons, and it looks just like spinning vacuum matter. What's causing it to spin? I don't know, man. Maybe it's intelligent. I don't even know what the word intelligence means really at that level.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot to go there. Like I could even, if we follow this theory, you could even say that microwave, like the stuff you brought up, was just the leftovers of the consciousness that is God, that he didn't sacrifice his ego, essentially, like, and the rest being, there's a lot of weird ways to go with that. And I do agree with the morality thing. A lot of people, I guess I'm technically a moral subjectivist, and a lot of people in our things don't like that. I still think there are preferable modes of being depending on what you prefer. Like, for example, I prefer cooperation and people to get along, or not. I guess being a libertarian, I prefer non-aggression. I prefer people not to aggress against people who didn't do anything against them. So if that's my starting point, I can derive from there what I prefer. But at the end of the day, like if someone murders someone, I see that as wrong. But obviously that person is safe. I mean, maybe that person did see it as wrong, but say it's some psychopath, they didn't see it as wrong. And like, I can argue with them and say it's wrong, but then they'll be like, well, I don't think it's wrong. And we can argue till we're blue in the face. And that's why it's like, at the end of the day, like, I don't care what his opinion is. I don't want that to coexist with me. And so I will do what I need to do to deal with it. So yeah, good and evil are things that I find to be kind of borderline nonsensical in a sense, but yeah, I guess we can go down that route if you want.
Yeah. I was thinking about, like, you see a guy kill another guy and eat him, and you're like, hey, that's evil. You just killed a guy and ate him. That's evil. And he's like, well, no, I was starving. I needed to eat to survive. So I killed it and ate it. Like, that's another animal, like a tribal guy who fights another tribe. They don't even think each other's human or whatever. And so to me, it was evil. To him, it was good because he ate, his family ate. And I just leave it there. I'm not going to push the issue. It seems so obviously subjective that, and we've had to create a subjective moral framework in the United States. We say it's given to us by God, that these things are, even God, the idea of God is like, not everyone thinks it. It doesn't mean just because you think it's there doesn't mean it is. Just because you think you feel it doesn't mean it's real.
And just even if there is a God, and even if there is a God, a lot of people try to use to appeal to God for objective morality. Even if there is a God, that doesn't mean there's objective morality. That just means there's some grand, all-powerful thing that says this is the morality that I dictate. That doesn't mean it's still just his opinion, and he's dictating it to you. Like, it doesn't mean it's objective. Like, it's still
The idea of God is very authoritarian. Like these organized religions that come out and say there is one God and you must obey this me through God through me or whatever the fuck it is. Okay, I think if there is a God, it's 100 quadrillion things happening at once. Mm-hmm. It's not like a thing. It's the interactivity of matter and reality. You can't to lock it in and say, I know I will be the one that you can follow when it comes to this conversation. Like, fuck off. Like, no, it's way too complex for a human to grasp. Yeah. We've tried. God, like these 3 letters explain what the fuck is going on. Come on.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, like, I don't like I said, I'm an agnostic atheist, but I am very friendly to the idea of there being some sort of deity, because that does have a lot of explanatory power. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. But I do have a lot of qualms with the idea of, like, the traditional concept of God that is this all-powerful, all-benevolent, et cetera, because it's like I personally think there are a lot of ways you can make arguments that there's no way there could be an all-powerful thing that's benevolent, personally. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But I'm more of a fan of, if there is a deity, that it would be something along the lines of like I don't know if you've gone down like Lovecraftian type realms, but like Lovecraft had Azathoth, I believe, is their all powerful deity in his realm, and literally it's the dreaming god, and all it is that literally he's dreaming and dreaming his existence, and he doesn't give a fuck about us, but he also doesn't hate us, he doesn't love us, we just are something that's in his dream, and that's it. Like there's like we aren't this magical things that he like. I mean, there's something to the like the Greeks and the Romans had gods, and we're just interacting like humans, and like the idea that it would be this perfect moral thing is weird. Like why like like if you're trying to apply morality to it, it's like I don't get why it necessitates that it's that if there is a God that he somehow loves you. Like the idea that those follow don't make sense to me.
I think I don't know if you know Zoroastrianism at all. It's a very, very ancient religion. Zoroaster was like up on a mountain worshiping the stars, I think, or the light or the sun or something. He was like into light, and I think he may have thought that God was light or heat. In that instance, I could see how it's this ever-present, warming, benevolent force of heat that's allowing us to exist in reality. But, you know, even heat can burn you to death. So too much of anything, obsession with anything. I like Taoism a lot in that I don't know much about it except that it's predicated on balance, the light and the dark working together or existing together to create reality. You need heat and you need cool. You need heat and you need the absence of heat. God in the absence of God. Like there's not much more rewarding than being still silent with no thought.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the idea of the heat thing, because I mean, if you look at some of the original religions, they do derive from the ultimate gods, usually be like the sun god, and it kind of derives out from there. And even I know a lot of Christians may get mad, but like you look at like some of the terminology that's used for Jesus, like the Son of God, and you look at a lot of the terminology is used even in Christianity. You can definitely kind of extrapolate. I don't know, like old religions from it, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The original ones would look at something like the god or the sun and be like, well, we derive everything from it. It's what allows our plants to grow, it's what keeps us from freezing to death, you know, or if we're going through droughts or cold periods, it's obviously God is frowning upon us. Like it makes sense from a simplistic thing that then, you know, we would apply extra things on top of that, and then we get to this, you know, modern religion as it is, you know. So I mean, whatever. Yeah. Maybe that's not to say Christianity is not true or whatever other religion is not true. It's just, I mean, I'm just, you know, talking out my ass just like every other person. So
with some of the little things in the organization of religion, be it Christianity or whatever, is when they call God he. That really bothers me. I don't understand why. I think it was made by a male, and they decided we're going to use some patriarchal Roman shit and make people worship a man, because we want to strengthen the man in people's minds. So God is a he. God's a fucking woman. Everyone came from a woman. God's not gendered, first of all, but if you want to pretend like it is, it's a woman. That's where everyone comes from. Everyone comes from women. Maybe that's hyperbolic. Maybe we'll be coming from test tubes in a little while, but they come from the woman's egg. Yeah, it's fertilized by the man. It comes from both. See, again, back to Taoism and the balance of nature. It comes from both man and woman. So maybe God is man and woman.
Well, counterpoint, dudes rock. So I'm just kidding. It's like an internet meme if you're familiar with it. But but yeah, no, I mean, really, I do think that might be even just a language thing where we, you know, it's like even the human language. If you aren't aware of the gender of something, usually the default is he. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess we can get semantic with it, but it is. But yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. But we don't really have a gendered term for non-gendered. It'd be weird to call God it in the Bible or what have you. But I get.
Well, actually, I don't think it would be weird. I'm surprised they didn't. I'm not surprised because I understand what the Romans were doing when they built the Roman Catholic Church. But it would make more sense if it said it, talking about it as an energy field. Like I don't understand who thought they had the authority to claim it was a man. It's completely fucking insane to me. I mean,
I'm sure there's probably some sort of in-bake the fact that, like, if you look at his history, it's only in modern times that, and that's not to say women didn't have roles or they didn't have their given role or that men always treated women like shit. But to some extent, we are the physically stronger race. And as we were more crude, there was more physicality involved. To some extent, we did kind of rule things in that way. That's not to say women didn't play an important role and they didn't have their own thing, but you know, in aspects of at large stuff like that, it makes sense that the default would end up just being he. I guess it makes sense. All right, let's move to. I want to touch on global warming, which I think does kind of play. Actually, no, I'm going to bring the super chat real quick. you should look up deists. They were much more pragmatic in their theology. Yeah, I kind of said that earlier, by the way, Trey. I said I'm sympathetic to deists, but I don't call myself a deist, because even then that would be, I have never seen anything that would cause me to believe in that. Although like I'm sympathetic with it, I find that to be more likely that there is like a, to that. But yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ian, or not. But
we had this indoor swimming facility growing up called the Natatorium, and I would go swim, and there was this mosaic mural of, like, it was a mosaic stonework of Poseidon. I think it was a Greek god of the ocean, and I thought it was God. It was this dude with a long flowing white beard. So when I was really young, I was like, oh, that's God, and the old man with the white beard. And that was what I thought of when I think of deism anyway. I think of like a human form, God in human form. I'm not sure. Maybe that's not exactly what it means, that it has to be in human form. They say God made man in his image, at least in Christianity. That's maybe not every deistic faith. Yeah. But is it deism, the humanization of God, or is it the animalization of God? If someone says God is a pillar, is an obelisk, is that a deity as well? If someone says God is an energy field, is that a solid form? Does it become deification, or is it only when it's humanized? I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah, I don't know if deism really says anything specifically. From what I remember correctly, deism is just more saying that there's some sort of supernatural entity that created it all, if you will, or deities. Doesn't necessarily have to be one. So it's very vague. It's just just a more of an open-ended thing than just traditional theism. That's a prescribed religion or whatever. Which, I'm cool with that. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's just universe farting pixies that created it all. I don't know.
Yeah. We were talking last night about pressure gradients. I think it's more of a twisting system that's forcing pressure and causing spin. But then when you look at like plasma clouds, or at least when I do, I start to see like coherence, which makes me think that there's some sort of intelligence. Maybe that's probably the wrong word, but that word being bluntly used. And like, if there's actual formation in magnetic fields, then maybe there is like an intelligent force causing it to, or it could just be a cyclical pressure experience of pressure gradients that are in motion so much that we think that there's order to it because we've seen that pattern so many times, but that's just the nature of the pattern.
Yeah. Oh, are you familiar with Gnosticism? Someone brought that up. I've never gone in too deep to Gnosticism, but I know when I have, it gets in some weird, and it's interesting. I don't know if you've gone down that route. I haven't gone deep down it, but if not, I mean, we can skip over.
No, not really. I think it's not. Gnostic means to know. Gnosis is like knowledge. And so what was it? Like it was pre-Greek or thereabout, or maybe even went back further than that, where they started to say, rather than focus on deism, we're going to focus on reality and what we know and try and explain it via that. Is that the idea?
I think, like I said, I haven't gone a deep dive. I know there are two different versions of Gnosticism. There's yes, like you said, there's to know. So like there's agnostic and there's Gnostic. But there also is the religious Gnostic, which I believe, if I remember correctly, is some sort of like offshoot off of like early Christianity, which it gets into where they start including other like demons and deities and such. And it's weird. I've never gone too deep down that. And I know there's a lot of weird conspiratorial offshoots that come off of there that kind of play into like modern day thoughts, whether it be Masons, etc. It does get interesting, but I know, yes, there are two different versions of Gnosticism. You are right. Gnosticism is also the concept of to know. And like whenever I get into arguments with people who are theists or religious folks, I always try to give inroads and be like, my issue is with Gnostics, people who claim to know. Like if you're like saying, I know there's a God or I know there isn't, then you're kind of an idiot. Now, if you're coming from a place of, I don't know, but let's have a conversation, and this is kind of what I generally believe, cool, we can talk. But if you're a Gnostic, you're kind of a cunt.
Yeah, I believe that too. That's why I even when I was young, I didn't believe in God, but I didn't believe it was no God. Either was impossible to derive. So I would say I'm agnostic. And like when I was like 11, I was like, oh, I get to pick. I'm agnostic. I don't know. Could be. Doesn't seem like it, but doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I label myself as an atheist, but it's just a matter of believing. Atheist, theist, Gnostic, agnostic. So I'm an agnostic atheist. But yeah. But all right, let's move into global warming, which I believe, if I'm familiar with your graphene stuff, kind of naturally dovetails into your graphene. But I just want to get your thoughts on global warming. I'll get you out of here so I can be respectful of your time after we go over this topic. But yeah, let's talk on global warming a little bit, because I've heard you speak on it a couple in your videos, and I like your take on it, because I'm not huge into science stuff. And I know this is where people like to beat you over the head with global warming, but and this is why we need the government to control everything, and we need to fucking control emissions and blah blah blah, and we need to force green energy and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, I don't believe that, because I'm an anarchist, more of a free market guy, and I'm like, well, the free market does it better, so. I mean, you're going to put a whole lot of people into poverty, and you're going to end up fucking yourself over and your idea of this green world. Whereas if you just enable the free market, it'll let you get where you want to go quicker. And I think you might be a little bit along those lines. But I kind of just got your thoughts on global warming in general, and we'll dovetail into your thoughts on graphene.
It seems like it's global warming is primarily being what people are concerned with, being produced by carbon dioxide and methane emissions, both of which can be converted into graphene, which is interesting. These are newer technologies. You can withdraw methane from the air or carbon dioxide from the air, deposit it onto palladium or some other metal, and convert it into graphene and hydrogen or something like that, methane particularly. When it comes to like emissions, I don't think we're ever going to ethically stop people from making trash. It's just the nature of being human. You take a shit, you eat your food, and the banana peel. What are you going to do? You don't eat the banana peel. You got to do something with it. I mean, you could maybe eat the banana peel. But so we have to reuse the emissions, not stop them. That's my main focus, is to reuse them. Now, whether or not we use a government to do it, it's a debate, because if we start building private companies that are reusing emissions, like withdrawing the carbon dioxide and turning it into graphene, it's going to create a mining industry, and people are going to start mining the air. It's to the point where they mine so much carbon dioxide out of the air that the trees start to starve and suffocate. And then we kill off the arbor life because of our incoherent, overzealous, privatized, whatever. So you would need like a government or a group of people deciding collectively, which is basically government, how much carbon we're going to be withdrawing together. And we'll all be aware, so we don't take too much, because we don't want to destroy the ecosystem all over again in a different way. But I think the privates, I think that we need government. We're going to need government interference on this one, at least over some sort of oversight. I don't want government control, but I want to make sure that people aren't pulling too much emissions out of the air. Yeah.
I guess my issue is, when it comes to government in general, you give them an inch, they take a mile, and roping them in is borderline an impossible task. And I know, especially given our current status with all the lockdowns and how it kind of would easily lend itself to, oh, well, we need to do this for global warming. And, I mean, if you look at, and I get where you're coming from, and obviously, it's the idea of government in general. There's a lot of like anarchist arguments, like, cool, like if we could do this, that'd be great. If we could have this coercive entity that does the good thing and not the bad things, that'd be great. But the problem is there are incentives in place that prevent it, generally speaking, from doing that. They may occasionally do good things, but they're probably not going to. And when we were talking about something like this, like global warming, there's so many third world countries that like this is what keeps these people alive, is like burning coal, whatever, et cetera. And I get it. It's like, well, this is, maybe this is bad. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm not like a global warming guy. I generally, to bring up a word we used earlier, I kind of just play agnosticism on this one. And I just kind of think like, generally speaking, like if we let the free market control it, I think people at large typically would prefer to spend less. If we could have some sort of magical green energy thing that we spend less or not at all for energy, we'd all love that. So if we enable the free market, say bring up like IP earlier, say we throw out IP, allow so things like water, people have like tried to make like water engines and shit like that before, or stuff like that. And then, like supposedly, I've always heard shit about like the fucking oil companies come and shut it down. I don't know how much truth there is to that. But the idea is that you let innovation take place and people are going to want this. Obviously when you end up with things like oil companies with lobbyists and stuff, that's going to be an issue, because they're going to try to take control of the government and, protect what's theirs. I think generally speaking, we're going to end up with, that. And whether you believe in global warming or not, at the end of the day, people want to pay less. And they're going to prefer these things when they become feasible. So if we're trying to force these green solutions down people's throat and they're not feasible at the time, nobody's going to want them. And also I think trying to get a coercive entity to shove it down is going to cause a whole lot of death and destruction. Obviously, I think it would be great if we had this, like if you could have this coercive entity that, strategically fucking, controlled everything and was able to be like, well, this and that, unless we get to some crazy technocracy, like we brought up earlier, I don't see that being feasible. because so.
Yeah, when I think about like withdrawing the carbon from the atmosphere and reusing emissions, what I would like to see happen is the private sector governs itself and make sure that it doesn't take too much. But as soon as profit motive comes in, and there's all these companies pulling carbon dioxide out of the air to create graphene with it so that they can sell their graphene, all of a sudden it's going to be like, hey, the carbon dioxide levels have dipped a little too low. The trees, we're starting to lose trees. And then if they're like, yeah, I'm not going to stop, and all the other private companies are like, well, we need you to stop because we're all trying to stop together. And they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna. Then you're like, we need military action. We need the government to send in police and arrest those people and shut their company down because they're destroying the earth. And I don't know if the private sector is capable of doing that without government interference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily entirely disagree with you, but another issue I have is I just feel like there's a whole lot of assumptions baked into something like that. Like I said, I'm not a huge science guy, so I don't even really know. I know a lot of people like to be like, oh, you're a fucking climate denier. But it's like, I think if most people are honest with themselves, I mean, I'm sure there are some people who really go in depth and know all this shit. I don't really know enough to have a strong opinion one way or the other. And I think most people would be, if they're honest with themselves, that's the case. I know they can appeal to science, but I mean, if you look at the past couple of years, appealing to science is kind of a fool's mission, in my opinion, because obviously, yes, in a perfect world, I believe in the scientific method. I'm not saying I don't believe in the scientific method. I'm saying the problem is when you have a whole lot of other entities that come in place, you look at like stuff like COVID and, things we were told at the beginning and then what end up being true at the end. The idea that I'm just supposed to accept the word of just some people that this is as bad as I thought it was or as bad as they say it is, I don't buy that personally. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying I'm not just going to assume it.
When it comes to the scientific method, I think sometimes people conflate science with the scientific method, and they're not the same thing. The scientific method is one type of science. Yeah. There's also quantum effects that the scientific method can't reproduce, but they know they exist, like weird anomalies. They call them anomalies. There's the placebo effect. Scientists don't know why. If you think something is real, that it has more, like when they give someone a control and a thing, sometimes it actually, their mood improves because they think they're getting medicated. And so their body picks up. And so it's like germ theory. Then you have terrain theory. Maybe they're fixing their posture because they have a will to live again because they think they're getting the thing they need. And then their endocrine system gets healthier because their posture's better. And scientific method's not capable of has never been able to like take those little out of the box experiences and really quantify them. It's really good for like building houses. You know what it's good for. It's good for reproducing things and being like, yes, now we can all agree within a percentage of a doubt that this is going to happen again when we try it again. Yeah. But there's a lot more to science than the scientific method.
Yeah. It's like just the building blocks of understanding if you get from there to there. I get what you mean. And I guess just like we kind of touched on technocracy earlier. I guess I'm hesitant to jump from go to scientism because I mean I don't know if you've seen I can't tell you how common it is that you see there'll be some study that happens and then there'll be an article that comes out and it'll be like, oh my god, this does this, and then you read the article and you're like, well, this like you're sort of right. This is like the whole Michael Malice factual but not truthful type thing. So I guess I'm hesitant to just jump onto the words of people, and I mean in general. And I know a lot of people say, oh, well, everyone agrees. And like, well, what specifically are they agreeing on? And what assumptions are baked into this? What studies do you have, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the idea that then we should pass that on to some sort of government entity is where I'm hesitant. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm hesitant to do it. I mean, everything they say could be true. I'm hesitant to be like, oh yeah, take complete control, So,
Yeah. You'll see studies where it's like 1,000 people were studied. 100 of them experienced A. Therefore, 1/10 of the people in the world will experience A when they take. And you're like, well, you can't upscale these studies. Like studies are not effective scientific. You might argue that they can be. Enough studies could be considered scientific modeling, but I've never seen a study where everyone was involved. I've never seen one. They're always like a small segment, and then they extrapolate it to the large whole, which is completely insane and not scientifically sound. I don't understand why. I mean, it's like the best they got, maybe they think, but or maybe they're just trying to push an agenda, and they're like, look, we had enough people. We studied 1,000. That's enough. Let's go. Let's push it.
Yeah, this is common in diet science. I know. There was a period of time where I was really deep into that, and you'll look at stuff and they'll take some poll from like, I don't know, somewhere in Italy, and they'll look at all these people and then they'll extrapolate data from that, and you're like, okay, well maybe there's something different about people in Italy than there is about people in America, or they'll be like, well, the vegan diet's superior, their vegetarian diet's superior, their carnivore diet's superior, and like, well, I mean, there may be more than like people extrapolate things. It's like the correlation causation type thing. It's like you're extrapolating a lot from this, and there's a whole lot else that could become from it. And I guess it's just where it gets way too nuanced to the idea that I'm going to take this blunt instrument, this government, and then trust it with it.
Yeah, and that's not even accounting for things that we don't understand or could be outside of our purview, like our solar cycles. Like maybe we're in a position in orbit around the galactic core or around the sun, around maybe that's causing, certain foods to interact with bodies in a different way for the next 7 years. And then you'll notice like a change. Maybe it has, we don't know. So to say this is it, everyone fall in line is fucking insane to me. It's like, it's autocratic. I don't know. It's very dangerous, a very dangerous way for people to behave.
Well, all right. I do think we're at about an hour 15-ish. If you want to go ahead and drop your plugs, we can go ahead and kill this because I do think I've taken up your time, and I do appreciate it. This has been a fun one. This is a little bit different than what I'm used to doing. We went on some just more just kind of weird tangents, and that's always fun. So I do appreciate your time. If you want to go ahead and drop your plugs, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. IanCrossland.net is my website, so you can go there and check out if you wanted to get in touch with me via social networks. That's where to do that. And Timcast IRL Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. You search Timcast IRL, you'll find it. You can also find it from timcast.com. I won't be on tonight, but I will be on Tuesday through Friday this week.
Hell yeah. And with that, this is No Way Jose channel show. You can watch me on YouTube, all the major audio packages, Odyssey as well. Follow me at Twitter at 2020 No Way Jose, patreon.com/No Way Jose 2020 if you're giving me money. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff you're supposed to do for YouTube stuff. And with that, I am out. I appreciate your time. See you guys. Thanks everyone who showed up for the stream.
Peace.
We are out.